Welcome back to B-Side Banter, and I'm here with a new guest. This is episode 11. This is Patrick Hicks from Patrick Hicks Music Story. I follow him on TikTok. I know you've got, stuff in a lot of different places. I think you even have a Substack, which is really cool. But I'm super excited to have you on. Maybe just give a little bit about what you do on your channels.
Sure, yeah. So I am on TikTok. That was kind of where I started. That's my primary platform. But TikTok might be going away, and
It's
also
true.
you never know how long any social media thing is going to last. So I am also on
Mhm.
Instagram, Substack, YouTube. But yeah, I started on TikTok. Today is actually my third year anniversary of doing
Oh,
TikTok.
nice. Well,
Today was the day 3
congratulations.
years ago that I posted my first one, and it's kind of a challenge from my wife, like a 30-day challenge to do something new, creative. So I was like,
Okay.
I'm gonna start a TikTok channel of music stories, and my wife is the one who's like, "All right, fine, you're Patrick Hicks Music Stories from now on." And
That's
so
awesome.
I've just been doing it for 3 years, just telling kind of mini like stories. I think of myself more as a storyteller, although it has evolved more into kind of mini documentaries. I do a lot of
Mm,
research and
yeah.
editing and putting in clips and stuff like that. So it's kind of evolved in the last couple of years. But that's kind of what I try to do is like a 5 minute long behind the music, like a behind the music with only the best parts.
Mm,
And
mhm.
yeah, it's a started as a 30-day challenge and then kind of took off in the first couple of weeks. And so I was like, all right, I guess I got to go beyond the 30 days. And now it's been 3 years. So I don't know
That's
if it's
that's
ever going to
amazing.
end. Yeah.
If it's ever gonna end, that's good. Hey, that's awesome, and, yeah, I'm sure it makes sense that, you start out with these really small clips, but I'm sure you feel this a lot, like, "How do I fit this awesome story into 5 minutes?" So, sure,
Mhm.
it just felt really natural to, start to make things a little bit longer because there's some stories, there's so much to it. It's so difficult to it's almost more of an art to like try to get it into a short time frame.
Yeah, I know that is sometimes when I get negative comments, like that's one of the things that frustrates me. If they're like, "Well, I could have just learned that if I watched the documentary about this band." Yeah, if you want to spend 2 hours watching the
Yeah.
documentary, do that. I'm
Yeah.
condensing it to like 5 minutes. You know how hard that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly. And it's the like is that like a comment like you're not finding unique enough stories? Is that like what that is? Like that's such a weird comment.
yeah, it
Uh,
doesn't happen often, but it is very weird that people are like, "Well, this story has already existed in their autobiography." Like, yeah, where do you think stories come from? Like, yeah,
yeah.
it's from a documentary or an
Uh,
autobiography that I read, and I'm
Yeah.
sharing it with you. This is how, this is how it
Yeah.
works. So it's that kind of odd comment. But actually, one of the greatest things that ever happened to me doing this is Questlove from The Roots does follow me on Instagram and like has
Really?
reposted my stories before, and he
That's amazing.
reposted one that I did about the band Fishbone,
Okay.
and somebody commented like, "Well, this story was in their documentary." And Questlove came to my defense and was like, "Well, not
Really?
everybody's seen every documentary." I was like, "Thank you. Questlove
Yeah.
gets it. Like,
Yeah, seriously.
this
That's
is,
awesome.
this is great. Defended from trolls by Questlove's
That's
pretty great."
amazing, actually, that's so
Yeah.
good. Yeah, and so true. It's like, yeah, this was from the like, what do you think anything is? Something comes from something, like, you can't
Right,
always be the first person.
these are called sources. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is,
Yeah. Oh, wow, that's wild. I would never watch, like, somebody's like, even if I know they're like, for example, somebody just being like, "Hey, I just watched this movie, and here's, like, the Coles Notes stuff." I'd never be like, "Well, why'd you post this? I'd rather just
right.
watch the movie." It's like the whole point is like that you're doing it so that it's like a really bite-sized thing. It's like something that you probably didn't know, and if you didn't watch the documentary, you definitely don't know, like, or read an article that you found it from or whatever it's from. Like that's
Yeah,
such a funny
it
comment.
is. It is weird.
People just want to be upset about something. They just want to or like have some power in the comments. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but oh man. But yeah, I honestly love your channel. I've been just continually like enriched by the stories you tell of, whatever artist it is. Sometimes I don't even know the artist or the band
Yeah.
that you're talking about. And but then I hear a story and I'm like, whoa, I should check them out. So, it's a really cool kind of just kind of twist of, it's like journalism, right? Music journalism, I guess, to a degree, music storytelling, whatever you want to label it as. It's really cool. And I think it's quite unique in kind of this music creator space we're in. We were talking really brief before we started recording that like most of my guests so far have been kind of in the music review
Yeah.
sphere. So I'm super excited to just kind of step out of that for a little bit and just talk about cool stories. So yeah,
I'm not
let's
definitely not
yeah.
a music reviewer.
Yeah.
Like I love music and I want to talk about it, but
Mhm.
sometimes, when I have not told a story but just talking about a album that I like,
Mhm.
I just like cringe so hard when I edit it back because I'm just not good at talking about music. I'm just like, this is awesome. This sounds
Yeah.
great. This is
Yeah.
cool. I love
Yeah.
this. But I'm just
Yeah.
not like articulate at like why something is great. I'm just
Mhm.
like, I
Mhm.
love it.
Yeah. Yeah. This sounds good to my ears.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know how to
Yeah,
explain it. It sounds
I
great.
I'm honestly the same way, and that's kind of I think where this podcast started from is that like I do really love talking about music. And I tried the whole like review and all
Hmm.
that stuff. And I just felt a little forced for me. I felt a little bit of that imposter syndrome, and
Sure.
also there's just so many people in this world that I was like, you know what, like I'd rather just talk to the people that are already doing it, because I think that's going to be a lot more fun for me and maybe
Yeah.
just a little different. So yeah. Anyway, I want to get into some of these stories because yeah, there's some awesome ones, and I'm looking at our outline here and some of the ones you put in, and I'm like, yeah, I want to hear these stories again. And some of them I don't know if I've caught the story yet. So, um,
Yeah.
I think it's just suiting to start with your favorite stories. Like it's kind of cool to hear like what are your favorite stories as a creator, that you've made all these stories. Obviously you found value in each one or you wouldn't have posted them. But what would be some of your favorite stories that you've ever kind of come across and posted?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've said for the longest time, like people would ask me sometimes on lives, like, "What's your favorite story?" And kind of my default answer for the longest time was the story I did about this guy Juan Gabriel, who
Mm,
is a singer from Mexico, is very very famous in Mexico, and I grew up in Southern California, so he was pretty famous in Southern California when I grew up
mm,
too. But didn't not a big crossover success, but in the like Latin music world is like the
mm,
Elvis of Mexico.
okay.
And so I knew his music, but I didn't know like his story. So I was trying like a theme one time. I was like, I'll do themed weeks, and this will be
Mm,
international week or international month. I forget what I was doing.
mm,
Um, then I kind of realized that was a bad idea because people don't really view my stories sequentially. It's not like a TV show. It's like a TikTok,
yeah.
and you're scrolling, and you have
Yeah,
no
yeah, yeah.
control over when people get the story. But anyway, that's what I
Yeah.
was trying. So I did all this
Mm,
research on Juan Gabriel, and he has the most insane story that I'd ever heard. And
mm,
there's all sorts of like classic tropes of like music stories that I love, like
yeah.
you know struggles and being told no and doors closed in his
Yeah.
face. But he had like everything, and so his story starts insane. Like his father, when he's young, goes nuts and
Mm,
like drowns himself in a river. There's like a lot of complicated
wow.
stuff. There's a fire, but his father goes crazy and like disappears from the family.
Mm,
And his mother like is struggling as a single mother. She might have some mental health issues too. She's not sure what she's doing. And so Juan Gabriel ends up going to this orphanage, and that's where he like plays guitar for the first time and learns music. And he has this mentor there. And so then he starts playing music, and he's from this kind of small town in Mexico, and he gets really popular singing in the bars in these small towns, and popular enough that everybody's like, you got to go to Mexico City to like make it as a star.
mm,
So he goes to Mexico City, and like it doesn't work out. Every door is like slammed in his face, and he realizes he was making more money back home, so he goes back to the small town. And then he works his way up. He's like, I got to do it again. I got to try it. And he goes back to the big city again. And the second time, he gets a little closer. Like gets some like studio sessions working as a musician, but it's like, it doesn't take off. So he goes
mm,
back home again. He goes back to Mexico City a third time. It's like, you could not have scripted a better, like,
yeah.
overcoming the odds story. He goes back a third time. And then when he's in Mexico City his third time, he gets arrested for a crime that seems really likely he did not commit. He
Mhm,
was at this party with like some rich people. He like found his way into this high society party, and he's accused of stealing some jewelry. and
Mm.
he goes to jail. And when he's in jail, he starts writing all these songs. Like, I mean, he'd been a songwriter, but he's writing songs about, being in jail and
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
his lot in life. And he's so popular in jail that the warden of the prison is like, this guy is amazing. He's this amazing talent. We should, maybe he's innocent. Like, we should like hook him up with a lawyer and see if, because he keeps telling everybody he's innocent.
Yeah.
So it's like Shawshank Redemption,
Mm.
meets Music Story. I don't
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
meets Walk the Line or something.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so he starts talking to this person who like uh, takes up his case. They decide there wasn't really enough evidence. He probably shouldn't have been in jail in the first place. Gets out of prison, and then his first single, and then gets a record deal. Through now he has these connections through the warden. The warden knew like a famous Mexican actress who helps him in his career,
Mm.
and his first single is a song like he wrote in prison, and it becomes a huge hit. And he goes on to become this massive star. Um, and
Wow.
so I always love that story. I was like, this has
That's so
everything you could
crazy.
want in a
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. That's
Um,
amazing.
but I always highlighted that one because when I posted it, I was like, this story is amazing. This is gonna blow people away.
Mm.
And then it totally flopped on TikTok. It got like
Yeah.
no views.
That's such a TikTok thing to do.
I know. And like it was one of those where like I felt good. Like the people who knew were like, "This is great. Like
Yeah.
Juan Gabriel is everything. Like this
Yeah.
is my mom's,
Mm.
house cleaning music when I grew up." But it
Yeah.
didn't do very well. But then on TikTok, they have this thing where 1 year for the 1 year anniversary of a video, they just pop up like, "Do you want to repost this video and repost it as
Mm.
like
Yeah,
on this day?" And so with that one, I was like, "All right, sure, I'll post it again."
yeah.
And the second time I posted it, it did really do really well. It got like
Mm.
hundreds of thousands of views. So I was like,
Mm.
"Okay, justice for my Juan Gabriel story."
Yeah, that's
Um,
perfect.
so
Man.
that one was always a favorite of mine. And then
Mm.
one that's never done well, and I've tried reposting it a couple times, is the story I did about Nina Simone, um,
Mm.
which is another one of my favorite stories. I mean, her whole life story is fascinating, but I really focused on um, this aspect of when she was a CIA operative,
Mm.
unbeknownst to her. And there's this amazing podcast, like one of the best podcast series I've ever listened to, called Wind of Change. You ever listen to
Mm.
this?
I don't think so, no.
It's fantastic. Look it up
Mm.
if
Okay, yeah.
it's kind of a one season. I forget how many, like 8 episodes telling this one story. But
Mhm.
basically, this reporter had heard this rumor that this Scorpions song, the like hair metal ish, like metal band from the '80s,
Mhm.
Scorpions,
Yep.
had this big hit called "Wind of Change," which was a big hit in America and in like Russia, like post
Mm.
post fall of the Berlin Wall, Russia.
'Kay.
Um, and the rumor was that the CIA had written that song, and so they did this big
Huh.
investigation
Okay.
into whether that was possible. Like, was this song written as Cold War propaganda? And
Hmm.
as part of
Hmm.
the podcast, they were like, well, it's not crazy because the CIA does have a history of using art as propaganda in,
Mhm.
movies, TV. And
Mhm.
then they had these incidences of musicians being used. And one of them was Nina Simone. And it's a very small part in the documentary series where they just kind of mention this aspect of it, but they mention the guy who wrote this whole book about it. So I read this whole book and I was like, oh, the Nina Simone part is so fascinating. So basically, they sent her on to do this concert in Africa with like Langston Hughes and some other jazz musicians and folk
Mm.
singers, like Odetta was there. They sent her on this like goodwill tour, um, and then it was because the Soviets were using the fact that the United States was very discriminatory against African Americans. They were using
Mm.
that as propaganda to be like, the United States is not that great. Look at how they treat black people. So to
Mhm.
combat that, the United States was like, oh, look at all these famous black musicians we have.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they brought them to Africa on this tour, and it was all a setup by the CIA. I just thought that was so fascinating,
That's
especially
yeah.
to use Nina Simone, who
Mm.
was very critical of the United States, especially
Mm.
of their
Yeah.
like civil rights history,
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
their involvement
Yeah.
in Vietnam. Very
Mhm.
outspoken to the point where she actually left the country in like the late '60s and never really returned. Ended up like dying in Paris.
Mm.
And she never knew. She never found out that this whole thing was a CIA operation. It was much
Really?
later where this was all
Oh,
uncovered, and
that's
they
crazy.
declassified these documents decades later, and they're like, yes, this was an operation. And it's like, oh man, of all the
Whoa.
people, this is the worst possible person you could have picked to be a CIA operative, like, she
Yeah.
would have been so mad.
Yeah, it's
Um,
true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so
but, uh
yeah.
but I always
Wow.
really loved that one. I tend to really like the stories where it's not just a straight musician biography where there's something else going
Mm,
into it, some
yeah. Yeah. Did
different
like
thing to it. Those tend to be my favorites.
have you dug into a lot of like that? I know there's a lot of conspiracy around like the CIA like utilizing specific people and almost like pushing their fame back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s. I've heard like rumors of like the Doors.
Mm.
Um like I don't know if you've gotten into a lot of that stuff.
I haven't
It
necessarily. I have heard the conspiracy theory about the Doors,
Mm.
and that I think isn't Jim Morrison's dad like a military guy, and there's some kind of
Yeah, yeah, there's
conspiracy
some
there.
connection and, like, some conspiracy that, the CIA was pushing his fame to, serve
I
whatever
have heard that.
purpose.
I haven't dug super into it. I've heard that him. I've heard it about Dylan a little bit, but
Yeah.
I mean, Dylan's one of those where people have a million conspiracy theories about him. So I haven't dug too much in. This was kind of the first time I really got into that.
Mm.
I'm not normally like really into
Yeah.
conspiracy theories or CIA stuff in
Yeah,
general,
yeah,
but
yeah. Yeah,
I don't know.
that's
That
so
one I just thought
crazy.
was real interesting.
Yeah, no, that is super interesting. It just made me think because I think just recently I heard this stuff coming back around again. These kind of conspiracies. So I wasn't sure if that's like sometimes people are saying this is a conspiracy, and it's like mostly proven, and then other times it's like
Right.
fully a conspiracy. So I wasn't sure if like you're like, oh yeah, the Doors, like yeah, I've done that. That's not a conspiracy. It's real. But yeah,
I
that's
have to dig into it more. My instinct is it is not a conspiracy, but I
yeah.
would have to look into it more. I mean, you never know. Anything is possible.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, that's a crazy one. I was kind of surprised that that didn't that there wasn't a lot of traction on that story just because like I know Nina Simone like had like a kind of resurgence in
Yeah, they made a movie about her, and there's a really great doc about her.
yeah,
Maybe people were Nina Simone'd out. I don't know, but
maybe I get
also, you just never know with like the algorithms, like
no, yeah.
if it's gonna
It's so
hit or
true.
get picked up. Like
It's so true.
every story I've ever done, I have no inkling of how it's gonna do. Like
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
that was maybe the one where I learned to stop trying to guess like
Yeah.
what's gonna be big and what's
Good. Yeah. You just put the story out and you're just like
yep,
come what
yeah.
may.
It's like there's no correlation between like how much effort I put in or
Mhm.
what like the biggest video I ever did was about No Doubt, and I was like trying to get it done before work. I like very distinctly remember like I dropped the kids off at daycare. I came home. I'm
Mhm.
trying to edit this video. I had a meeting and I was like trying to edit it, and I was like it wasn't perfect yet, and I was trying to get it to a certain length, and I
Mhm.
was like, you know what? I'm done. I can't do anymore. I'm just gonna put it out. It's not like exactly where I want it to be,
Yeah.
and I put it out, and it's my biggest video ever by far.
That's that's
So
so yeah, that's
you
so
never know.
crazy. It's true, you really never know, like, it's so wild. Um, yeah, and I'm convinced you never know, and nobody actually knows. All the people that tell you that they know, they're trying to sell you something.
I
They
mean,
they don't
speaking
actually
of
know.
conspiracy theories, yeah, there's so much. I remember when I first was posting, there would be
Mm,
so much advice like what's the perfect time and day to
yeah.
post, and
Mhm, mhm,
what do you do after you post? Like there'd be some crazy ones. Like even I would talk to other creators and they're like, every time I post a video, I close the app, I open it up again, I like
mhm.
3 videos, and then they would have some weird voodoo of how they
Yeah.
would get it,
Yeah, it's more of
the
like their
most
personal
views.
it's more like their personal superstition than it is like
Yeah.
an actual real thing that works.
Yeah.
That's funny.
100%. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's really crazy. From like your perspective, because obviously you've been doing a ton of research. Like, I guess like you've probably posted hundreds of stories at this point over 3 years. Did
Yes. Yes.
were you? How often do you post? Just this is kind of a side question,
Yeah,
but
so when I first started, it was a 30-day challenge, so I posted every day, like, that was the
it's
challenge, even
wild.
if it
Yeah,
wasn't,
yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
want to.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I kept up the every day for a long time, and that was
Mm,
hard, but
that's yeah,
we
so
were
hard.
I think my youngest daughter was, like, not even 2 yet, and, So it was kind of a sacrifice, but I was like, I don't know, something weird is happening with this. Like,
Mhm.
so I think
Mhm.
it was like 2 weeks in when I did a video on Prince that got 1 million views, and
Mhm.
my wife and I were
Wow.
just like, what is happening?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're like, all right, let's keep it going. So I did one a day maybe for like the first year.
Mm.
And then I was like, okay, they were starting to get more involved. They were starting to get longer and more
Mm.
research and putting in more clips and stuff. I mean, the first video I did, it was just me talking on the phone. Like,
Yeah.
no, there's no clips. There's no.
Mhm.
Actually, the first one is terrible because I put the song that I was talking about.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, it's
I used.
background.
Yeah, I used the background music from TikTok. I like
Yeah.
put it on, and it's so loud you can like barely hear me. It's real bad.
Yeah.
Um, but so as it was evolving, I was like, okay, I can't do this every day anymore. So, and I was trying to do like once or twice a week, and now I try to do once a week. If I
Mm.
can do
Yeah.
once a week, I feel good about that. I feel like people are getting their money's worth
Yeah, totally.
free, and
Mhm. Yeah.
I did recently. I did this really long series where I was reviewing every single Grammy Awards ever, and that
Oh,
took
wow,
like
yeah.
a couple
That's
months,
yeah.
and uh, and then I was posting like 4 times a week.
Mm.
And I was kind of back
Okay.
to the grind of, like,
Yeah.
posting regularly. That
Yeah.
sucked. And,
You're like, "I don't wanna do that again."
no, never again. So, yeah, maybe once a week. And I have a full-time job, so
Yeah. Yeah.
until it's not a full-time job, then, once a
Yeah.
week is about the best I can do to have it be quality.
Yeah, yeah, to keep up with the standard that you have right now, yeah, totally. Um, yeah, so obviously, at this point, you're probably even potentially into the thousands or in broken 1,000 stories that you've told. Um, and so I guess my question would be, who do you think are like some of the five, like, or however many number you have, most influential bands or artists in history? Like, obviously, there's going to be some pretty obvious ones on there, but I'm just very curious because you very clearly are in um this space of like telling stories, and a lot of that is history. You might do some like like some newer stuff, but I think for the most part it seems like what I've seen, it's mostly kind of history stuff. So yeah, I'd be curious who you think are these five most influential bands or artists.
Sure. I mean, so I think, I would start with the Beatles, not
Mhm.
chronologically, but just one of my biggest pet peeves is people that say, like, the Beatles are overrated. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's just not even possible. It's not even
Yeah.
possible to overrate them, like, they're
Mhm.
so important in the history of music. Um, like, I've kinda tried to see the arguments. I mean, first of all, I hate when people say something is overrated because they personally don't like it, like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
another pet peeve on top of it, like,
Yeah.
so, it's just that what they did to push things forward in terms of, like, producing the album as an art form, like, changing the nature of what pop songs could be, like, it's just not possible to overrate them, so I think
Mhm.
any music that came after them is influenced by them, whether the particular artist was influenced by them directly or not. I mean, they were
Mhm.
influenced by something that they did. So, I mean, the Beatles are just huge. And then
Yeah.
so much of what we think about of a rock and roll band is, the Beatles. They write their own songs. Like
Yeah.
anytime I do anytime I do a singer that does not write their own songs or that uses collaborators, I have so many comments of people being like, they don't even write their own songs.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not throughout history, like a songwriter was a very different
Mm.
entity than a singer. Like it was not
Absolutely.
common to write your own songs. I mean,
Mm.
they were very inspired by like Buddy Holly and the Crickets, who
Mm.
did write their own songs. So,
Yeah.
I mean, nothing that the Beatles did was like completely original, but like
Yeah.
nothing is. I think maybe
Yeah.
that's why people want to say, oh,
Mhm.
well, they're just copying like, 60s girl group stuff. And like,
Mhm.
okay, everything builds on something, but like,
Yeah.
how much they push things forward, I think cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
And then a similar I'm gonna jump around a lot, but in a
Sure.
similar vein, I also hate when people say Nirvana is overrated,
Mm.
especially if you just don't like their music.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally. Yeah.
Nirvana was so important. Um,
Mm.
I'm slightly biased there because that was my first ever favorite band. Like I was
Mm.
there
Sure.
for a lot of Nirvana, but like even going back and researching now and doing the history and I've never even done the story of Nirvana on the channel. It's maybe like too personal to me, so I don't want to
Mm.
read the comments of people that don't like them.
Yeah.
But
Sure. Yeah.
people don't realize how much they changed the industry and how much
Mm.
like what a big deal it is to be on like pop charts, to be number one on the pop charts. Like,
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
there were other popular bands, there were other influential bands, but like to be a band that sounded like Nirvana, to be
Mm.
basically a punk band that
Yeah.
had influences of metal and
Mm.
classic rock and pop, but to have such a punk ethos and
Mm.
to be on the top of the pop charts and to
Yep.
be the biggest artist in the world is insane. And I
Yeah.
don't think people
Absolutely.
realize how much they shifted the culture and how much the music industry changed after them. Like
Mhm.
the bands that got signed in the wake of like we have to find the next Nirvana. Like you
Yeah.
wouldn't have Green Day, you wouldn't have like
Yeah.
the pop
Absolutely.
punk movement, you would
Yeah.
not have emo and like so
Mhm.
whatever your subgenre is that you love. That you're like I don't even like Nirvana. I listen to indie rock recorded in some guy's basement. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that wouldn't exist in
Yeah.
the same way
Exactly.
without Nirvana. So
Mhm.
I just bother me when people don't give them their proper credit.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, now let's go way back because that's kind of the most modern one I think I would think of. I would probably put Muddy Waters on the list.
Okay.
Also, any five is going to be incomplete, but
Yeah.
um,
Sure.
going back to what I said about the Beatles being kind of the form of what we think of as the modern rock band, a lot of
Mhm.
that does go back to Muddy Waters' band. Muddy Waters being like electric guitar, electric bass,
Mhm.
drums, singer, maybe second rhythm guitar. That's Muddy Waters' band. Like
Mhm.
that didn't come from nothing.
Yeah.
So I think that was very important. And this the Chicago blues, again, I'm also biased because I live in Chicago, but I'm not from
Mhm.
here, so I think I can say like the Chicago blues uh, influence on rock and roll, on psychedelic rock, progressive rock, like
Mhm.
everything that happened in the 60s and 70s, I think is so important. You wouldn't have the Rolling Stones without Muddy Waters and
Mhm.
Howlin' Wolf and
Mhm.
guys like that.
Mhm.
Um, so I think just Muddy Waters as an influence, and he's also an influence on like Bob Dylan, on folk singers,
Yeah.
on you know, such a diverse range of artists that came out in the 60s and 70s. I think you could trace back to Muddy Waters.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and that's very important. And also, because it's history, like I don't want to lose sight of like I talk about rock and roll mostly, but in all its forms, like I talk about hip hop, I talk about R&B,
Mhm.
um, and I talk about a lot of classic rock. And sometimes I have kind of like old white boomer dudes who are like, "Yeah, talk more about Led Zeppelin." And so
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
important for me as like a history buff to like not lose sight of like this music came from people of color. It came from
Mhm.
a lot of, you know, blacks from the South who migrated north and electrified. Like that created a lot of what we think of as rock and roll. So
Mhm. Yeah.
that's really important to me to like make sure
Mhm.
that that is in everything I do, like that I know the history and I'm respectful of the history of like where the stuff came from. So I
Mhm.
think you gotta go
Yeah.
Muddy Waters. Um, it's hard to leave Chuck Berry off the list. I mean, he's
I know. I was just
important.
thinking when you were talking about that, I was just thinking like it feels like that's the next step, right? Like of the if you were to go chronological.
Yeah, if I was going kind of like Chuck Berry would definitely be in there. If you want to go
Mhm.
back further, there's this woman, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who was one of Chuck
Mm,
Berry's
yeah.
guitar inspirations. I mean, she's
Mhm.
huge in the formation of rock and roll. But
Yeah, yeah.
um, I don't know if I had to pick one, I'd go with Muddy Waters.
Yeah.
Um, I'd also go with the Funk Brothers, who
Mhm.
not necessarily an artist that like released records, but so the Funk Brothers are the band that played on Motown.
Yeah.
Like pretty much every Motown hit from the 60s and early 70s
Mhm.
you could think of, they were the house band.
Yep.
And I think the influence of Motown is very, very important on
Yeah.
kind of how rock and roll branched off. Like the fact that the Beatles were so influenced by Motown and kind of
Mhm.
brings that sound into the fold of what we think of as rock and roll.
Yeah.
And then to explode to current music, like you can
Mhm.
trace modern R&B directly back to
Mhm.
Motown, back to the
Yeah.
stuff that
Absolutely.
the Funk Brothers were doing. I mean,
Mhm.
James Jamerson's bass playing, like
Yeah.
the musicianship. I mean, this stuff is been
Mhm.
sampled. It's in
Yeah.
the DNA of hip
Absolutely.
hop. Like so,
Mhm.
so I think when you look at all the branches that come after the '60s of music, the Funk Brothers have to be there.
Mhm.
Um, and then I maybe go Iggy Pop or Iggy and the
Okay.
Stooges.
Okay.
I mean, there's so much debate about what's the first punk band, and
Mm. Yeah.
And I think a lot of that debate is kind of meaningless because that's just not how genres work. Like nobody's
Yeah.
really the first
Mhm.
anything
Yep.
usually. I mean, usually these things come from somewhere. So,
Mhm.
but Iggy's maybe as close to the first punk that you can get.
Mhm.
Um, so I think his influence as a performer, and the Stooges did not sell a lot of records when they were together, but like the
Mhm.
influence that they had going forward, I think, like to use an example of another person on the list, like Nirvana is not the same without the Stooges. Like
Mhm. Mhm.
the Stooges and then punk rock changed everything going forward so much that I think they have to be on the list. You have to account for punk rock. I think if you're talking about the history of music. Um, I did this video once. I actually never released because it was kind of just for myself. But I was reading this thing that kind of shocked me that Blink 182, I think it was the album Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, was the first ever #1 punk album. And I
Hmm.
was like, is that, could that really be true? Like Green Day's Dookie never went #1.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, whether you think Blink 182 is a punk band, like,
Yeah.
aside. So I was like, let me go back through the history of #1 albums on the pop charts and see, like, and so I think it's true, unless you count Nirvana as a punk band. But
Mm. Sure.
but basically from the late '70s on, like, you start to see these albums that are influenced by punk. Like maybe they're not
Mm.
punk. Like U2 is not a punk band, but U2
Yeah.
started as a bunch of kids playing instruments, playing Ramones songs because they didn't know how
Yeah.
to play anything more than three chords. Like they were so influenced by punk and post punk.
Mm. Mhm.
And then, you listen to Joshua Tree and you don't think this is a punk album, but they have these punk roots. So like the roots of punk rock are in everything that comes after, and you start to see it in the '80s.
Yeah.
And then when you get into the '90s and you get into grunge and anything that came after, new metal,
Mm.
alternative, like the roots are there. And I also think that punk rock, is that hip hop is kind of like its own offshoot of punk rock. Like
Mhm.
there are like directly, like Chuck D has said, like he's influenced by punk bands, and Ice T has said like hip hop is the black man's punk, like stuff like that.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
idea of maybe I don't know how to play an instrument the best, but I can take a sample and loop it and I can rap
Mm.
over it. That to
Yeah.
me is punk rock.
Yeah.
And now, hip hop is probably the biggest musical form in the world. And
Mm.
so I think you got to give. I know it's weird to draw a line from like Iggy Pop to, I don't know, like Playboy Cardi or something, but I'm telling you, it's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just there in the history. So
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
that would be my fifth one.
Yeah. Oh, I think people do. I think absolutely people kind of undervalue the influence of punk on music as a whole. I think people kind of keep it as like this offshoot or this thing that happened that kind of came and went and like it's not in existence really at all anymore. But it's like no, like yeah, like maybe you were really annoyed in like the 2000s when pop punk was like the big thing and like the Warp tours were going through. Like I don't know, maybe that was really annoying to you, but for the most part like punk has like altered music in a way and influenced music in a way that like we wouldn't know like if punk didn't exist, music as itself right now would not be in existence at all.
100%. I'm wearing this Jack White shirt because I just went
Mm,
to a Jack White concert the other day,
nice.
and he was amazing. I love him. But I
Yeah,
was
he's
with
great.
some friends who are like, maybe not as like musically knowledgeable as I am
Mhm.
about the history of things. And their comments were just real funny. Like, yeah, I liked him. Like, he wasn't so focused on like hitting every note, but he had so much energy. And as a kid, because he came from punk, like
Yeah, yeah.
he's like a punk kid who's really good at the guitar, who's playing the blues. But
Mm,
it's like it's hard to see when they're just singing along to Seven Nation Army, and they're like, I know this
mm.
song. They sing this in football stadiums, but it's like
Yeah,
this comes from a punk tradition and is
yeah,
mixed with
yeah,
other stuff. Like
yeah,
so
totally.
much of I don't know. I mean,
Mm,
punk is
yeah,
near and dear to my heart, so I might
yeah.
be a little biased there too, but it's
Yeah,
everywhere.
it is. I really agree with that. I think that is like a big thing that has really shaped music as it is today. Yeah, and all of those all of those influential, bands, artists, I think they're definitely deserving to be in there.
I mean,
Um,
and I would have a different list tomorrow, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah, exactly. There's so many people, bands have shaped music in just insane ways. Um, let's move back to some more stories. What were some stories that like really surprised you? That as you were kind of like going through them, you were like, "Whoa! Like this is not anything that I ever thought would have been a story."
Yeah, yeah. One that really sticks out. So well, I'm gonna back up a little bit. So when I first started doing TikTok, um, anytime anybody with like a blue check mark would follow me, it was like a big deal. And I was like, oh my
Yeah,
god, that's exciting.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and uh, and it wasn't always somebody that I knew, but I was like, hey, they have a
Mm,
blue check mark. I must be doing
yeah,
something.
yeah.
But one of the first people that like I knew who this was, to me, it was like a celebrity. Is this guy Brian Koppelman, who wrote the movie Rounders, and
Okay.
so, like, I loved that movie. I saw the
Mm,
movie in the theater with my dad. Like, we were both really
mm,
into poker. It was like a big
mm,
thing for me. And then he's
yeah.
gone on to do a bunch of different things. And he had so we talked a little bit, and then he gave me his phone number, which I thought was insane. And I actually like talked to him on
Wow,
the phone, and I was like,
that's so
"This is
cool.
so crazy."
Mm,
And he mentioned something. He's like, "Oh, I love like your stories. It kind of reminds me of my days like back in the music business." I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know he was in the music business." And then I didn't
mm,
think like I should look him up or research or anything. So I was like, "Okay, do to do."
yeah.
And I'm going on, and then I'm like looking like who should I do a music story on? And I was like, you know who I
Mm,
really love, but I don't know their history is Tracy Chapman. So I start
mm,
researching the story of Tracy Chapman, and she is playing the guitar at her college, just like busking, it's like playing by herself. And then she gets discovered by another student at her college who's like, "You are amazing. Like, you have
mhm.
to, get a record deal." And she's like, "I don't know." Like, she wasn't even really like pursuing it seriously. She was just like, I'm just like,
Yeah.
I sing these little folk songs on my guitar. And this guy's like, well, my dad is actually like this big deal in the music business. He like ran a agency. And he's like, I've never asked him for a favor. I've never like tried to use his connections, but like, you are so good that I am going to tell him like he has to sign you. And then that
Mm.
student was Brian Koppelman. And I was like, wait,
That's
that's what he meant by I was in the music business? Like, you discovered Tracy Chapman?
that's
And then so I'm like
insane.
researching the story. I was like, oh, he had like he wasn't just in the story, like, he was integral to being like, "You
Yeah.
should get a record deal," and he kind of, like,
Wow.
helps her on her way to getting her deal, and, yeah,
That's
and then worked in
crazy.
the music industry for a little bit, and then was like, "You know what? I wanna be a screenwriter instead. I'm gonna go write Rounders," and, so that one really surprised me because I was like, I've actually
Wow.
spoken to this dude on the phone, and I did not know that that was his, kinda claim to fame, so,
That's so crazy. I
that
guess
that one surprised me.
some people just have so much talent at things that they just can
I
pick
know.
any lane to go into. It's like, wow, could
Yeah.
you sprinkle some of that over here, please? Yeah, that's wild. That's a wild story. Do you have any other surprising stories?
Um, yeah, remind me of what I put on the list.
I think you have on the list, you have Cranberries and Third Eye
Oh,
Blind.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so Third Eye Blind I just reposted because I think it's been a year, maybe
Oh,
2
okay.
years since I posted that story. The Third Eye Blind one really surprised me because that was a band I liked in the '90s, but I was kinda deep in like, I was kind of like a guilty pleasure for me in the '90s,
Mm,
I was
yeah,
listening to,
yeah,
like, a lot of crust punk, but that first album really
yes.
is, like, the songs are really good, and,
Yeah.
so I was researching them because I didn't know that much about them, and, um and again, it's one of these where, like, I don't realize the interconnectedness of all these things. So, like,
Mm,
Stephen Jenkins is living in San Francisco, and he's friends with, Linda Perry, like, pre Four
mm,
Non Blondes, and they're, like, comparing
mhm.
songs, and she's like, "I had this song, it's like, called What's Up?" And he's like, "That's a great song." And he's like, "I got this song called, Semi Charm Life." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, it's great." And it's like, how weird, just 2 like, she's a
Yeah,
waitress, and he's a whatever the hell he's doing,
yeah.
uh and they're just, like, writing these songs that become 2 of the biggest hit songs of the '90s, and they're just, like, comparing them in their
That's
apartments. Like,
that's so
that to me is
funny.
crazy. The fact
Yeah.
that he used to be in, like, a hip hop duo, uh,
What? I
using
didn't
hip
know that.
hop, like, pretty loosely here, but, yeah, he was in this hip hop duo called Puck and Natty, where, it was, like,
Wow,
him and
okay.
this other guy rapping, and
Uh-huh.
they actually got a song on the Beverly Hills 90210 soundtrack. Like, they had
What?
a little bit of success,
Yeah. Whoa.
and this rapping, and then you can hear the influence
Yeah.
in Semi Charmed Life. Like, he's kind of sort of rapping, and
Yeah.
it's the only
Yeah.
song on the record that sounds like that. And it's
Mhm.
kind of like that was a song he had during his Puck and Natty days that kind of
Wow.
carried over to his new band. That blew my
Mm.
mind. Then the fact that he got a cease and desist for using the name Puck and Natty because it was a play on this other group in the Bay Area. They were like a folk duo called Tuck and Patty, and so they sound like a
Mm.
cease and desist, like, "Stop calling yourself
Interesting.
Puck
Yeah.
and Natty."
Oh
People
my
are gonna
gosh.
confuse it with Tuck and
Yeah.
Patty.
Yeah.
And then this isn't even in the story, but, uh, there's, only so
Too
much you can
much.
include in
Yeah.
5 minutes,
Yeah.
but Tuck and Patty have a niece who is Saint Vincent, the,
Oh my
like,
gosh. Yeah.
Grammy-winning indie
Yeah,
singer.
yeah. Yeah.
So it's just
That's
there's so much interconnectivity in all these stories and people crossing
yeah.
paths on the way
That's
to fame. That one really
that's so
surprised
crazy.
me,
Wow, that is
because I
crazy.
didn't know any of that stuff. It kinda thing I have, like, a little bit of a blind spot with bands from the '90s because, I was a kid then, there's these
Mm.
bands that I love, and there
Yeah.
wasn't really a way to research them
Mm.
like there was, like, when I was listening to Third Eye Blind, I was also reading, like, Led Zeppelin biographies and Black Sabbath
Mm.
biographies
Yeah.
because they were
Yeah.
out, like, you could get
Yeah.
big old
Exactly.
tomes from the
Yeah.
library, so I was reading all these, but nobody was writing a Third Eye Blind biography, so it's like I
Mm.
didn't
Mhm.
know as much until, I kinda started doing this, and it's like,
Yeah.
"How did they start?" And it's like, "Oh, I didn't know they had a life."
Yeah.
When you're a kid,
Yeah.
they come on MTV and you're like, "This is the first thing they've ever done."
Yeah.
I
They're
don't know why,
instant
they
they
look
got
like
instant fame.
right. Yeah, but then that's kind of a recurring theme in these stories is like nobody
Yeah.
did. Nobody was
Yeah.
an overnight success. Like, you
Mhm.
had
Yeah,
to
super rare.
try
Mhm.
and fail a lot of times most of the time. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then the Cranberries was another one that surprised me a lot in a similar way of I just knew the Cranberries fully formed and I did not realize that they were a band before Dolores Reardon got in the band.
Mhm.
They were originally called the Cranberries Saw Us. It was like a bad pun on the cranberry sauce, and,
That is such a bad band name.
really bad, and, they had a totally different singer, a male lead singer, and
Mhm.
they're kinda good, like, you can still listen to their first couple EPs, and, like, I really
Yeah.
like them. They're a little bit generic, like, they're very Smiths inspired, kinda
Mm.
jangly
Sure, yeah.
guitars, and they sound like a lot of other kinda late '80s alternative bands in England, but good. But then when they got rid of or that singer quit, I think it was just kinda like a side project for him, he was like a drummer. So they need a singer, and they get
Mm.
Dolores, and the first song and they give her, like, an instrumental tape of, like, instrumental songs that they've been working on, and she goes home and records and comes back, and the first song she writes is "Linger." So, right off the bat, like, that's your first song
Yeah,
together?
that's
That's the first
insane.
song you did? Like, a song I
Yeah.
still listen to all the time.
Mhm.
Um, but then
Yeah.
also, like, that's what I love about bands is, like, bands are such a unique collection of people, like, you had all these talented musicians, but you just, like,
Mhm.
didn't have the right singer, and then you get
Yeah.
this kind of
That
once in a generation voice and songwriter with Dolores O'Riordan, and you,
mm.
like, put it together, and you're like, "Oh my god, that's the Cranberries." So that one, like,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
surprised me
so
that they
crazy.
they had a history before, and then
Yeah, that is
that's
so
your first
insane.
song, you start with
That's so
"Linger?"
crazy.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, such a popular song, and it's a song that just keeps going, like, it just had its, like it's it just, like, resurfaced on TikTok
Yeah,
to a
yeah.
whole new audience because of the whole Royal Otis
Royal Otis
cover
doing
or
a
what
cover, yeah.
so, it's like it is crazy, like, that's just such a timeless track, and
Well,
for
there's
that to
something
be the very first, that's so
yeah,
wild.
but I think
Wow.
there's, like, a magic about bands where it's like,
Yeah.
she probably had she couldn't have written that song on her own. She had to hear the
Mm.
guitar and the
Yeah.
instrumental and be inspired,
Mhm.
'cause it's kinda
Yeah.
similar to, like, the Pearl Jam origin story, like, an instrumental tape, and then you get this, like, unique voice and you put
Mhm.
it together, and it's like magic that couldn't have
Yeah.
occurred any other way. I don't know. That stuff
Yeah.
excites me.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, I do think there is some sort of, like, electricity with the band when you've got all of these creatives in a room and, like excuse me, being in Nashville here, like, that's like in the songwriting world, that's what they do. They get multiple people together in a room and write. Writing individuals writing in country music isn't like a super common thing anymore. Like, and I don't think it's really a common thing with many like big time songwriters anyway. Like just having the extra input, and whether it's through band members, whether it's just through other writers or whatever, like I just think having those extra voices, extra creative inputs is just what makes music so exciting sometimes. You do have, obviously you have these people that come along that are just like generational songwriters, Bob Dylan, and you're like, yeah, like obviously he just, does it by himself a lot. So
Yeah,
and he's amazing at it. But I think that's more rare. I think that's more the exception than the rule. And I think a lot of people want that to be the rule. Like, no, you got to write all your own
oh yeah.
songs and it's like that's just not how it works. And I don't think that's how it's supposed to work either. Like, I think you'd
There's a
miss
very
out on a
yeah.
lot of good music if that's how you expected everything to go.
There's a very overly romanticized ideal of like, the auteur, the tortured
Yeah.
genius who writes all the songs. But yeah, there's a
Mhm.
beauty in collaboration. Like
Yeah.
even like
Absolutely.
I told a story about Beyonce once, and she gets a lot of flack that I think is rooted in a lot of sexism and racism. But she gets a lot of
Mhm.
flack for using tons of writers and tons of collaborators. But like
Mhm.
that's the kind of music she makes. Like if you listen to
Yeah.
Lemonade, like it's this insane mashup of styles and collaborators
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
using little blips of things. And like I think people just see like, oh, 20 writers. Like I think people think of it like a movie. Like if a movie
Mm.
has 20 writers, something probably went wrong. Like so there's
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
a million rewrites and it's usually a mess. But like with
No.
songs, especially with
To
sampling, it's like it's
Yeah.
no, this is something unique and creative and weird. And the song I was talking about particularly was this song "Hold Up," where
Mm.
it's like some of the writers, though, there's like three writers that are on that song because she used one line of a Soldier Boy song, and the original
Yeah.
Soldier Boy song
Yeah.
had three
Yeah.
writers. And like
Yeah.
I think
Exactly.
it's so
Yeah.
weird for people to be like, "Oh, well, she's not talented," or she's
Yeah.
relying on these things when it's like, you know how easy it would have been to leave that line out. Like
Yeah.
you could have left that line out, and the song would be 99% exactly the same. Like, she's
Yeah.
putting these things in for a very specific purpose. Like,
Yeah.
she's
It's
using these
intentional.
textures to create something unique, which I think a lot of people don't get. So, yeah,
Mhm.
I love Bob Dylan, but I also think that like collaboration is a beautiful thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you think of these influential bands that you talked about, the Beatles, Nirvana, like as much as we like to like kind of romanticize Kurt Cobain and John Lennon and you know, other people that are like the individuals in the band, like the whole band came together and wrote these songs. Like and like yeah, like maybe on one song like one guy put more weight in than the others, but like they all came together and wrote this, and it wouldn't be the song without the whole band involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think the
No.
Beatles are a beautiful example. Like, they do have great solo records, but
Yeah,
like
yeah, absolutely.
listen to them as a band and then listen to the solo record, and it's just like you can tell that the magic is there when it's the four of them together.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You sent your 5 favorite artists, which, were awesome and all over the place, which I appreciate. Also your 10 favorite albums, which were the same, awesome and all over the place. But I did wanna talk, because, there's certain people that we talk a lot about on this channel. You have an as your favorite, artist, Kendrick Lamar. Obviously, he's, like, having his moment right now, so we've talked a ton about Kendrick Lamar. But one person that I thought was really awesome that I love is David Bowie.
Yeah.
And I don't know how often I'll be talking about David Bowie on this podcast. So I just wanted to talk about well, first of all, he has like what, like 26 albums or something insane like that.
Yeah, we've got a lot.
His discography is insane.
Yeah.
But you sent me your 5 favorite albums, I believe, of his, and yeah, if you could just, like do you remember them?
Yeah.
Or
Oh
do you
yeah.
want me to
Oh yeah.
yeah, so, I'd love to hear your 5 favorite Bowie albums.
Sure. So where to start? So I think for number 5, I put Young Americans.
Mhm.
Again, like this list probably changes, but it's pretty solidified. I love Young Americans. I think it's super underrated.
Yeah.
Um, I think I like his, like, kinda soul music collaborations,
Mhm,
his dance music stuff.
mhm.
I didn't love as much the stuff in the '80s, like, I'm not a huge Let's Dance fan, but Young Americans I really love, I feel like that's underrated. Number
Yeah.
4, I have Black Star. I mean, the greatest, like, death album ever made, I think.
Mm.
Just incredible, like, knowing that you're gonna die, knowing you wanna make one last statement to the world,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then it's an album like that. I just think it's so fantastic, and I
Mhm,
think it really encompassed a lot of what I loved about David Bowie. It's like he doesn't just play the hits, like, he's out there trying to innovate, he's out there trying to do
mhm,
something that you've never heard before, something different,
mhm,
interesting. He's influenced, like, speaking of Kendrick, like, he talked about how To Pimp a Butterfly was a huge influence on that,
mm.
record, and, like,
Yeah.
I just love the idea that's like, I'm an old man who's been famous for 50 years, and I'm
Mhm.
going to record my last album, and I'm listening to Pimp a Butterfly. And I want to,
Yeah,
like,
that's so crazy,
channel
yeah.
that energy into
Yeah.
my project. Like,
Yeah.
that's how I would like to live my life,
Mm.
and end it. But then, okay, then my top three is probably pretty safe. I got to go with Low,
Mhm.
and I kind of, in that kind of like classic, like the Low Station to Station Heroes period. I think I like Low the most, but
Mm.
that one changes. But I just love that he was just like swerved. Like, I'm gonna be experimental. I'm gonna work with this
Yep.
crazy producer. I'm gonna bring in German, like weird electronic influences, and
Mhm.
just always trying stuff new. But
Yep.
they're still just great songs. Then I'll go Ziggy Stardust, which it was the first record of his that I really, really got into, and I think it's
Yeah.
pretty amazing. So,
Mm.
um, it might be cliche, but that's definitely gotta be in my top two. But then I do think Hunky Dory is my number one.
Mm.
This is a
Mm.
record before Ziggy Stardust and was
Yep.
a commercial failure because he struggled for a long time before he finally hit with Ziggy Stardust, and then people
Mm.
went back and kind of discovered Hunky Dory. But um, I think
Yeah.
just the songs I come back to more on Hunky Dory. I really love that record, and it's just kind of weird. Like, it's kind of how we think of, like, Revolver did everything that Sergeant Pepper's did the next year, but
Mhm.
Sergeant Pepper kind of gets all the credit because it
Yeah.
takes
Yeah,
people
yeah, yeah.
time to catch up. So I always
Yep.
do kind of like the album before the big breakthrough. I find is
Yeah.
the one I like the most.
Mhm. Yeah. I think I'm there with you on that. I do think I have a preference for Hunky Dory over Ziggy, and even though maybe Ziggy is like his most approachable album,
Yeah,
maybe I
I
don't
mean, it's a
like.
great place to start. If I would,
Yeah, it is. It's huge. But yeah, I do. I think I just appreciate Hunky Dory more just as a whole work, and I'm curious because you did mention Station to Station, which is like it's one of my favorites, but I think
Mhm.
it's like it's more just because of like the moment I had with it. I think
Yeah.
I when I first started this channel, I decided that what I was gonna try to do, which did not last long, was to listen to like I think I was gonna listen to one album a week from like Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums of all
Okay.
time. So I started
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
album 52 and was gonna work up to one.
Yeah.
And I think album 50 or 51 was Station to Station.
Oh, nice.
And I didn't really ever like I was a David Bowie listener before that for sure. Um and I don't think I really ever listened to Station
Yeah.
at
It
all.
doesn't have a lot of
No, it's only like
radio
6
hits. Yeah.
tracks or
Yeah.
something like that, and it's yeah, it's definitely like it's not an album that you'd be like, "Oh, like, yeah, this you need to listen to it. It's got these huge hits on it," like
Right.
you
Right.
said. But I when I was listening to it, just like hearing like I guess I felt his experimentation, his risks, the risks he was taking.
Yeah.
I appreciated all of the things he did. I thought that it was just a really cool moment in his career for sure. Like you mentioned that he was kind of getting out
Yeah.
and just totally like yeah, I like craft work
Right.
and
Right. Yeah.
or craft rock
Kraftwerk.
or
Yeah.
whatever it's
Rock
called.
Kraftwerk. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and it like he just went into it and
Mhm.
I appreciated that and I thought that it was pretty awesome. And like I kind of like read a lot of maybe kind of the stuff behind it, that he was like, this was pretty deep into his addictions, and
Yeah.
like,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
he was like, I guess one of the songs on Station to Station doesn't even remember recording because he was high the whole time. Like, you know, typical, like,
My
you know
typical
what.
70s rock stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And yeah, I just loved that whole album, and you know, it was probably the first time I really dug into um like just listening to an album because people have said it was good, even though, like, because I guess when I started, I was like, yeah, there's nothing. I don't really love it, but like, because I was doing this channel, I was like, no, I gotta listen to it a few more times because I have to like
Yeah.
talk about it. And the more I listened to it, the more I was like, I love this. And like, that
Yeah.
was my first experience of, I guess, doing that, like stretching
Mm.
myself musically, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Um, and yeah, I think at this point, it's probably the album that I would just like. I would probably listen to that album cover to cover. One, it's shorter for sure, but like over any of his albums at this point. I
Mm.
don't know if
Yeah.
I'd put it at number one in my top five, but like, it's just one of those albums that has like a soft spot in my heart
Yeah.
now
Of
because
course.
I think of this moment I had with it.
Yeah. I don't ever really try to be like too objective. Like music is
Yeah,
personal. Music
obviously, yeah,
is
it
subjective,
is.
and it's like I always try to list things as this is my favorite. I'm not saying it's the best, but
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he was such a versatile artist, and absolutely no fear to
yeah.
just like take any risk
Hmm.
and do something different. And yeah, like that story you were talking about, where he was listening to Pimp a Butterfly. Like, that's wild to me. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I
I
love
mean,
that.
I really remember in like the late 90s, like 99, him coming out and talking about Lauryn Hill and how great the miseducation of Lauryn Hill was.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
he was just
Yeah.
one of those guys that was just like, even though I didn't love the music he was making in the 90s necessarily, like,
Mm.
just cool to be like, all right, this dude's still like current. Like, he was just
Yeah.
always cool to me. Like,
Mm.
okay, like,
Yeah.
he's working with Nine Inch Nails, he's doing side projects, he's
Yeah.
always just like moving forward. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, he has a deep appreciation for anything creative. Like, you
Right.
know, so yeah, um, that's awesome. Do you have like a 5 favorite songs? Would you be able to pull that out, or you think that's so insane? There's like
Yeah,
thousands.
that would be real hard. Um,
There's so many songs.
yeah, there's just so many songs. So I had to go albums.
Yeah. No, that's totally good. And then another of your kind of favorite artists, the Misfits. So yeah, let's walk through your top 5 favorite Misfit songs.
Um, that's hard. Yeah, that's real hard. I really love the Misfits. It's like one of my the kind of most clear musical memories is the first time I ever heard the Misfits.
Hmm.
It was the song "Bullet," which I don't know if I did I put it on my top 5. It's
You did, yeah. That's number 4.
number 4. Yeah, so "Bullet" was the first song of theirs I ever heard, and I heard it over the phone. My friend played it for me because we were just kind of
Yeah.
getting into punk and like finding new punk bands, and it
Mm,
was hard, in the
yeah.
90s to get
Mm,
new music. So when
yeah.
one of us got a tape or a CD, it was a big deal, and we're like, okay, you got to hear this. Like, we've seen this band's logo on a million jackets at shows. Like,
Mm,
now let's listen to it. So he played it for me over the phone, and I was like, I got to come over to your house and listen to the rest.
mm,
Um, so Bullet's on the list. But then I just got like deep into obsession with the Misfits. So my favorite song is Hybrid Moments.
mm,
Um, I just think that's like an amazing song. It's just Glenn Danzig's songwriting is so good, and I think he's so underrated because of the genres that he's done and the material, like the subject matter that he sings about. But if you just strip that away and just like the as a song, I just feel like that song is I don't know. I don't know if beautiful is the right word, but I just love that song. Um,
mm,
and then probably a close second is Night of the Living Dead. That's one I love. Um, again, like just like the melodies that he did and his voice. I just find his voice very one of a kind. Um, and that's one I really love. Mommy, Can I Go Out and Kill Tonight? It's that's why I love the whole evolution of the Glenn Danzig Misfits.
mm,
Um, like the when he started getting more into hardcore and more metal with like Earth AD, I think some people aren't into that stuff as much, but I like that stuff a lot too. But
Mhm.
um, I think "Mommy Can I Go Out and Kill the Night" is great. And yeah, what did I put for number 5? Maybe Skulls? Maybe
Some kind of hate.
oh, Some Kind of Hate is great too. That was one of the
Mm.
first songs I ever learned to play on the guitar. So
Oh, really? Yeah. So
it's
that
very
has a
easy.
special part in your heart
Yes,
for it.
very
Yeah.
easy, like 3 chord, 4 chord
Mhm.
song, and then it has the easiest solo of all time. It's just well,
Yeah.
matches like the melody exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, Misfits were like I was deep in when I was in high school. I was like
Mm.
going online. I read this digest called the Misfits Bible every day.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
if they ever
Man.
let me make a, if they ever let me write a music biography or make my own music biopic, that's my number one. That's my
Okay.
They gotta
That would be really cool.
stop making every, classic rock band ever into a movie and have some balls and do the Misfits.
Yeah, yeah, seriously. Yeah, there's some pretty influential like punk bands that you could do some really good stuff with
Yeah.
for
I mean,
that
they did
those
the
types of
Sex
moments.
Pistols, TV show,
Mhm.
which I did enjoy, but,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's more to punk than the Sex Pistols, come on.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And your journey in punk, like did you kind of stay in that 90s punk scene or did you keep following it once it like got into the 2000s going into like pop punk or did you kind of stay away from that?
Yeah, I mean, I liked Green Day a lot. I
Mhm.
mean, they were, like, a lot of ways my gateway into punk, like, Green Day
Yeah,
led me to
sure.
Rancid, and then Rancid really led me to a lot, like, everything from, like, The Clash to The Exploited, like, Rancid
Yeah,
had
yeah,
such
yeah.
a and then, Operation Ivy, all that stuff, um so I don't dislike pop punk at all, but
Mhm.
I very distinctly remember where I played this Battle of the Bands when I was in high school, and I was in like a very hardcore, like anarcho crust punk band,
Mhm.
and there was like a
Mhm.
pop punk band on the bill with us, and they
Yeah.
won doing a cover of Blink 182's "Damn It." And
Oh, no.
now I would probably like be friends with these guys, but at the time we were just like,
Yes.
this is not real punk rock. Like, what is this shit? We were just pissed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily my scene, but I mean, I've come around to a lot of that stuff. Like, I'm not, as
Mhm.
elitist as I once was, like, in high
Yeah.
school.
I
Um,
do I
but
do
I just
find it
it's not my thing.
yeah, I do find it, like, interesting because that would have been, like, where I kinda entered the punk scene would have
Mhm.
been through pop punk, and then I would have kinda got like, so similar-ish, but, like, I spent obviously a lot more time in pop punk and then went backwards from there, and I do think that, like, it's funny how one birthed the other, but, like, the worlds are almost, like, opposed to each other, like,
Yeah.
it is really interesting, and it feels so, like even though, like, you can obviously be like, "Yeah, I get where this is in the same,
Right.
overarching genre of punk," but, like, it feels like the genres are so different. Like, they
Yeah. I
feel
mean,
so different.
I think too, like, the thing I love about Green Day is like they came from this Gilman Street scene where they were outcasts at how poppy they
Yeah.
were and how
Yeah.
much their song was poppy, but they were part of the scene and they played shows with all these hardcore punk bands and they're playing it. They came from that world, so I think is why
Mhm.
I enjoy them. Whereas you have
Mhm.
bands that came after them that are just more in like a bubble. Like you're a pop punk band that played on a show with like 5 other pop punk bands, and you're
Yeah,
your
yeah.
own scene, and
Yeah.
that's valid in its own way.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it just
and,
wasn't
like
for me.
yeah, and, like, Green Day is, like, pop punk light, like, in terms of, like, how deep into the pop side of punk that pop punk goes, like, Green Day's pretty, like I think a lot of people that love pop punk would almost consider Green Day more like punk rock. You know what I mean? Like, because they're because of that, because they started in the scene with the hardcore
Right.
punk rock bands. Obviously in that scene the contrast was pretty obvious. But
Yeah.
then like kind of what was birthed out of that, because they did kind of like obviously, like you said, you can't really necessarily link the birthing of a genre to one band, but if any
Yeah.
band has pioneered pop punk, like Green Day's definitely up there as one of them.
Yeah. But I mean,
So
that to me, like punk is like what it stands for has always been way more important to me Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
most music in general, I care more about, what it's saying, not
Mhm.
necessarily politically, but just, does it have something to say? And that something to say could be emotional, it could be personal, but does it have something to say?
Yeah.
And so for me, like, I will die on the hill that Green Day is a punk band because they did whatever they wanted. They played the music that they wanted to make.
Mhm.
It didn't all
Yeah.
resonate with me. Like, I don't ever want to hear "Good Riddance, Time of Your Life" ever again. But like,
Yeah.
but they were
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, fuck it, we're gonna do a ballad. Who cares? Like,
Yeah.
this is the music we want to make." For me, that's way more important than a band that maybe has all the sound and the look
Mm.
of
Sure.
punk, but like, it's empty behind it. So
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's such a funny yeah. Punk is funny that way because, like, you have, like, it's all about, like, what you said, doing what you wanna do, expressing how you wanna express, but it is funny when you get, like, Blink-182 on the scene and you're like, "These people are children." Like, they're like, at least express something relatively, like, meaningful, like, not just like, I wanna take off my pants and, like, videos of them running down the street naked, like, there was just so I just remember there was so much, like, backlash to them specifically because of just how, like, it's like, "You guys are just children." It's different than what everybody else is doing here.
I've come around to them a lot just because, like, I've seen what they've meant to people, especially
Yeah.
people younger than me. And there's a lot of, friends I have and other creators who, like, that came at such a pivotal point in their life that that's like
Mm,
an important band for them. So, I have
mhm.
respect for that. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
not
is
my
it
cup of
is yeah, and it's funny to kinda, like, see it all kind of in the timeline, and yeah, it's so interesting, but, um, yeah, I think we'll kinda just close it up here. I appreciated
tea.
this. This was, like, a lot of fun. You had
Yeah, it's great.
tons of great stories, and so if anybody's listening, you wanna find Patrick Hicks Music Stories on TikTok. Is that kind of your handle everywhere?
Yeah, yeah. If you search
Okay,
Patrick Hicks music stories, it'll come up. So,
awesome. You also have a Substack, right? That was kind of
yeah.
your
Sub-
insurance for TikTok closing or
yeah,
being
Substack
banned?
is definitely the kind of main home base. Like, everything
Nice.
will be on there and it's
Okay.
permanent and I don't have to worry about,
Mhm. Yep.
algorithms and
Mhm.
copyright strikes and all that kind of
Exactly.
stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, do you follow, is that the correct term for Substack? Do you follow somebody on Substack or do you subscribe?
I think you just subscribe, but yeah, either
Okay.
one. Follow me there,
Alright.
subscribe to me there.
Well, yeah, you should go check them out on Substack, TikTok, wherever you kinda consume, but, yeah, if you wanna make sure that you see his stuff, go to Substack. It was a lot of fun having you on,
Thanks. It's great.
and, yeah, we'll be back next week with another episode, another guest, so we'll see you then.
Thanks for having me.